Hi there, this is Carl Irwin, the Common Magician, and this is going to be a free-ranging discussion on ambiguity. Ambiguity is the topic. I actually made a short video on what I think is the most important principle in magic of, I think, all types. While I was at the beach just last week, I usually, when I'm on vacation, go to North Carolina every year, down to Topsail Island. Been doing that for forever. And over 40 years now for me. And I usually do one video while I'm down there. It's just some kind of short. And the weather was kind of crummy and rainy when I did it, and the video didn't come out well, so I just didn't bother uploading it. But I'm going to talk about it now. I think the most important principle in magic, governing principle, is ambiguity. That may seem extremely broad and generic, but I think it's true. I notice a lot of magic creators, especially whenever they're marketing an effect or write up in a book, they'll talk about as a positive aspect of a method that it does not use equivoque. That's a good thing, that it doesn't use equivoque. And I don't particularly like that kind of approach, because I think what it really means is that they don't really, I don't want to say this in a way that won't be offensive, but I don't think I can. It's almost like they're really saying, in my mind, they don't know how equivoque works. And so therefore their effect doesn't use it, because they don't know any way to use it where it's useful, where it is effective. Highly effective, that there's some kind of negative quality to using equivoque. This is not a video about equivoque. This is actually a video about all the other things that are not equivoque. And I hear these performers say, "Well, this method doesn't use equivoque," or "You don't want to use equivoque for that. It's a good thing this doesn't have equivoque in it." And in the end, the method that they are using 9 times out of 10 is using equivoque. They just don't recognize that that is the case. I think that we forget that equivoque is not special. Equivoque is merely a very focused rendition of the same ambiguity that most effects operate on. Ambiguity is a lifeblood of most types of magic. Now, how is this true? I want to talk about a few other terms before we get to that. So ambiguity is one, and the general meaning of the word is that it's open to interpretation. When something is ambiguous, it's not clearly defined, that it could have some other alternative interpretation. 2 people may see the concept differently, 3 people even 3 different ways, and so on. That's ambiguity, and I think that's very effective. We'll talk about the different ways that ambiguity is applied in various methods that are not even equivoque here in a little bit. The next word I want to talk about is arbitration, and it's a word that's closely related, but doesn't, I think by most people who understand definitions would say, is not related to arbitrary. So you have arbitration and you have arbitrary. These words sound like they are very closely related. Most people, when they define them, would say that they're not at all. They're distinctly different terms. But I think they actually are quite related in their etymology and the way that these words have come about. Arbitration is a legal kind of term which refers to an adjudication, a judge that is making a decision based on presentation of facts and testimony, and then they will make a decision, and that is a final decision. And it usually, often as I understand it, arbitration doesn't have judicial review in most cases. That decision is final, and both parties agree to have their case settled via arbitration. So arbitrate comes from arbiter, which is just to make a decision, just making a decision. Now, arbitrary also means make a decision, but what arbitrary means is to make a decision on a whim. a random decision without any thought. And it is my understanding that arbitrary actually comes from the idea of an arbiter in arbitration, and the misconception or accurate perception that an arbiter in arbitration is making a whimsical choice, that there's no real regulation on how they make their choice. They are free to make their own choice on their own opinion. And that, in and of itself, is arbitrary, or can be arbitrary in terms of interpretation. I think the concept of arbitrary decision making, or arbitration in this sense, is also very, very important in magic, and you can see how that connects to ambiguity. Because if something is arbitrary, the reasons are ambiguous. Okay, and we'll come back to this again. So the third word I want to talk about is equivocate, equivocation. So we know the word equivocate as a method, and that has a very specific kind of meaning. And usually what it means is, in the worst sense, it means the spectator would go ahead and pick one, and then you say, this is the worst example. They say, pick one. They say that one. Say, okay, we'll get rid of that. Okay, and some people, that's really all they know about equivoque. Some magicians, they don't really ever investigate it any further, and they just kind of understand that you merely keep it or get rid of it, whatever it is that you need to do, and that's all equivoque is. But that I don't think is really, I mean, it could be what equivoque is, because you're just asking someone to select without having a clear definition as to what you will do, that information gap in there. I think that is very generically and generally an accurate description of what equivoque is, but that's not good equivoque. Equivocate, equivocation, which is where our concept in the method of equivoque comes from, equivoque, for those of you that say it that way. I personally don't think it sounds fancy enough whenever you say equivoque. So I say equivoque. Okay, so equivoque or equivoque, what it comes from is equivocate or equivocation. And equivocation, it just means that there is it's a use of a word in more than one sense. And if you want to find an application of equivocation, and those who equivocate, just look at politics. Politicians always equivocate. It's a known thing. Some politicians will even say, just like a magician would, they would say, and with no equivocation, I say this, and you analyze what they're saying, and you can see that they actually mean more than one thing, right? Will you run for president? And, the politician says, right now I'm focused on being the governor that I was elected to be. Well, that's equivocation, right? It's non-committal. It's ambiguous. It doesn't answer the question. It leaves open interpretation one way or the other. One can say they have no interest in running for higher office, and then in the other sense they could say, well, they're just passing the buck on the question. They're ignoring the question. They're sidestepping it, and it clearly rings that they absolutely have an interest. And that interpretation can be varied. So equivocation is that kind of meaning. You can see how we get from that equivoque, because that's what equivoque is. It is non-committal in terms of the application of the words that are being used. It leaves open any kind of rules by which one is bound by. A choice is made, but no rules have defined what that choice necessarily means. Now, as an aside, and if we don't get into it later, I'll just say one thing I like to do when I am using equivoque is I will say, look, what you say is what we will do. No equivocation. Because people know equivocation, and this won't fool magicians at all, but I think it kind of hits it right on the nose when you say that. I don't do it all the time, but it is something I do like to say, particularly if I only have one layer in there of equivoque, and there's free choices and maybe a multiple outs at the end, which we'll get to in a minute. I'll talk about that. Whenever you have that kind of a scenario and there's very limited equivoque, I love to say, look, no equivocation. what you say is what we will do. And right there, the actual equivoque is in the statement, what you say is what we will do, because I haven't really explained what we will do, right? When I say, look, select one right now. Look, whatever you say is what we will do. And they say that one. So long as I do something with that one, I am doing what I said we would do. That what they said is what we will do, but I didn't explain what we would do, right? So, you can really put a couple of verbal layers on this stuff to kind of high power it, at least in the onset, in setting up a premise or kind of rules for what you're going to do. And rules, I think, are very important. We'll talk about those, when rules are good and when rules are bad. I think rules and laying out rules can be a very bad thing in many situations, unrelated to equivoque. The next thing I want to talk about, apart from these three words, so ambiguity, I think, is essential in magic. Apart from equivoque, it's just ambiguity is very important to various kinds of methods, and we'll talk about methods here next, specific methods. Arbitration and arbitrary kind of justification, arbitrary choices. That is making a decision without having to justify it, just merely doing it. A lot of performers do that. Again, we'll get into that in a minute. I think that's very important. Of course, that's what ambiguity thrives in, is in arbitrary kind of choices and decision-making, arbitration. And then equivocation, of course, is tied into that. It's a lifeblood of arbitration, and of course runs on ambiguity itself. So these three words, I think, are very, very important. Now, some methods that kind of operate on this stuff, multiple outs. Multiple outs are not equivoque. I think it was Hector Chadwick said, goes by Hector Chadwick, it's a stage name. He said that in a lecture I heard him give on equivoque, that multiple outs is kind of like a second cousin, right? It's a close relation to equivoque. If you're using multiple outs, you're actually employing equivoque. You're employing equivocation at a level, because in the situation, let's say I have an out here, I have an out, that's hidden underneath the mug. I have an out that's inside the card box or under the card box over here, and I have an out that's sitting on top of the deck of cards that I have right here. What I have here is the ability to pivot to an alternative outcome. Well, that's what equivoque is. The choice is not merely to say this, this, or this. The choice has to do with an identity, and it's the revelation is where the flexibility is at. If the chosen identity leads me here, then that's where I go. If the chosen identity leads me here, then that's where I go. If the chosen identity leads me here, then that's where I go. This is kind of a very general explanation for multiple outs. But multiple outs is equivoque. So if you have an illusion that you use or a method that you're employing, and you say it has no equivoque in it, but it has multiple outs, well, you're actually employing equivoque. It's the same principle. It's operating under arbitration. It uses ambiguity, and it has equivocation, because the words that are used or the implication of revelation has more than one meaning available to you as a performer, and it essentially is just equivoque. It's equivocation. Another place where you might see this is something like the patio force. Patio spelled P-A-T-E-O. It stands for pick any two and eliminate one. Pick any two, eliminate one, patio. And the way that works, if you look at the patio force, that's to say that this one, the 10 of clubs, is the one I want. And I've got all these other choices here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I would say and they wouldn't see this. They don't know what the outcome is going to be, but just for you. I would say go ahead and Now, let me explain this the way it normally would be done and why I don't like it this way. I'll get to it in a moment here. Let's say you start by saying, look, we're going to try something. We're going to play a game. You're going to pick two, and I'm going to pick one to get rid of. And then I'll pick two, and then you pick one to get rid of. And we'll do this, right? So you say, go ahead and pick two. And they say, these two. And I say, okay, I'll get rid of that one. And then I pick two, and I say I pick these two. Now, this works so long as I don't pick the one I'm trying to get to. I pick these two, and it doesn't matter which one they eliminate, right? So they eliminate that one. And then they pick two, and they say they pick these two. Now, they could pick this one because I can always eliminate the one that it isn't, right? So they pick these two, I eliminate that one. And then I pick two, and I pick these two, and they eliminate that one. And then they pick these two, and of course I eliminate that one. And then I pick these two, they eliminate that one. And then, of course, they pick these two, the only two left, and I eliminate that one. And we're down to this. And there's a lot of really great effects that operate on this force. If you have evens, they need to pick the first two, and you eliminate. If there's an odd number, then you pick the first two, and they eliminate from that. I think that's right. I won't go back through it. You can kind of work this out. But that's a patio force. And that also works it also thrives in equivoque. This is equivocation that is happening here because there's an ambiguity to what is actually happening in terms of the choices. Now, it's buried deeper than typical equivoque, but it does thrive on ambiguity and an arbitration. There's arbitrary choices being made. Where are the arbitrary choices? Well, the arbitrary choices and the ambiguity is in the rules of the game. It's not in the location of the elements. It's not in what will be done with them because that's spelled out. But it's the rules themselves that have the ambiguity and the arbitration and the equivocation. Why are these rules this way? Why do you have to have those rules? I argue that in something like the patio force, where you have this situation, once you say, we're going to try something where I'll pick two and you eliminate one, and then you'll pick two and I'll eliminate one. Once you say that and you lay out the rules, which is usually the way this is done, you've actually given up the method. Now, you didn't spell out all the implications of that, but that is the method. You've actually told them that this has some funky rules to it, and it is the funky rules that allow it to work out. So I have a recommendation on how to deal with that in a minute. I'll come back to. Another kind of place where you get ambiguity, I think, is something that might be known as the 64 principle, or it's the Bill Simon four queens procedure. There's another way that it is known. And that works like this. We'll do just three. So I've got 3 red and 3 black. The way this will work is I think this will come out right if I do it. Something like this. I've got red, 2 black, and then a red and a black. Okay. And actually, I'll turn these face up just to make it very clear. Now, ultimately, I want them to have the red cards, and I want me to have the black cards. And they would be face down so you wouldn't see it. Now, the way this works is it's similar. There are rules. I lay out 2, and I say, look, pick any one you want. Now, they're both red, and I want them to have both. They don't know that. They're face down or whatever. Or they're envelopes if you're doing a bank night. There's a number of bank night routines that operate on this. Four Queens trick operates on this too. Or one of the many Four Queens tricks operates on this. But they would point to one, and then they take it. They select one, and then all I do is I drop the other one to the bottom. Okay. Now I put out 2, and I say pick one for me. They're making all the choices, but either one of these is fine. It doesn't matter what they pick. So they slide that one to me, and then I go on to the next one, and I have to do a little bit of juggling here. I got to get what I do. The way I do this is I split it, and then I just split these 2 cards with the other 2 cards, and it reorganizes it. That's an easy way for me to remember how to put them back in. I lay out the next 2 after I've done that, and covertly or openly, but without any attention to it. And they pick one for themselves, and it could be either one. Then I drop this down, and then, of course, the next two I put out, either one is mine, they pick one, it goes to me. So now I'm left here with these two, and here, usually when you're doing this, you'll do some direct equivoque. John Bannon has a really great one that he does for a bank night routine, where he just has them point to one and he simply drops them where they belong. First, he'll drop the one that they point to. There's other ways to do this, though, where you can actually verbally kind of cover it. You can say, and just, could you pick one more for me? And when you say, can you pick one more for me, or point to one more for me, what you're saying is has a double meaning. It could mean, can you pick one more for me? As in, can you do this thing for me, please? When you say for me, it's like saying please, right? Or it could mean, can you do this thing for me? Pick one for me. It means both. And if you say, oh, could you pick one more for me? Or could you point to one more for me is better, because if they pick it up, then they own it, right? And they do that. If they pick this one, I say thank you, and then I give them that one, right? If they pick this one, you say perfect, and you give it to them, and then you take that one. So either way, right, you have some equivocation. So that's the patio. That's the 64 principle. Just using a few cards here. You can do this with more than that, or envelopes, as I said, for a bank night kind of situation. Now, I think that there's another way to do this that we'll come back to here in a moment. I'll show you another way I've seen this done that changes. It operates on another layer of a method in there that gives you a little bit more flexibility, particularly when you get to the end. But this operates under ambiguity, but it also operates under rules, just like the patio force. It's essentially saying, we are going to play a game. I'll put out two and you pick one. Then I'll put out two, and then you pick one for me. These are the rules. But why are there rules? That's where the ambiguity and the arbitration and the equivocation is at. It's in the rules themselves, and this is what makes it work. It's still equivoque when you get down to it. It's ambiguous language and meaning and arbitrary rules that have to be followed, right? So that is the 64 principle. Other things, just some honorable mentions. There's a Mark Elsden, Michael Murray principle that Mark Elsden has written about, which I don't know that he has a name on it. I like to call it revelation by approximation. So in mentalism, if I write down some kind of a prediction on a piece of paper, and then some choices are made, and then it's revealed that my prediction is not a direct hit to what was said, but is approximate to it. My prediction actually says something related to the sequence, but not to the actual outcome. I mean, I don't know how this would work, but let's say there's some kind of a math game being played, and somebody ends up with a specific number of points, let's say, 15, and someone else ends up with 3. And my prediction just says that so-and-so will win, but it doesn't tell them that they ended up with 15. It avoids the details, right? It's a revelation by approximation. That's a bad example, but it's a good enough one because I don't really want to give up what this is. This is a published kind of thing. But this also operates on ambiguity. It's really just equivocation. It's still just arbitration, arbitrary kind of outcomes that are not clearly defined and predetermined and spelled out at the beginning. There's flexibility in the way that it is revealed, and I think that's another place where you find it. But it also depends on, the rules being arbitrary. That I have a prediction, but there's no rules that box me in on my prediction. I have flexibility in that. Another one is that you'll know is the Dedi-Corbusier free will reveal. And this is a revelation based on not approximation, but based on perspective. And that, the application of perspective, is equivoque. That in itself is equivoque. It's ambiguous. It is that the language is ambiguously applied to create the sense of a clear meaning, but it didn't have to have that sense of meaning. It had flexibility to be another one. Ambiguity is, I think, so crucial to all of magic. I would also add to this all kinds of spectator-controlled shuffles. So when you have a deck of cards that has to have a maintained kind of order or stack or group or packet, whenever you have the spectator shuffle it, and it's a controlled kind of situation, so you get this packet, you get that packet, you get that packet, everybody shuffle your packets, but the packets are still maintained in their location. This also is operating on ambiguity. There is a set of rules to it. Why am I giving you this packet and that packet and that packet? Why do I put the packets back together in this way without having them mixed together? Why do this procedure this way? I never give a justification for it. I never explain it. I just merely do. And the ambiguity in there is actually what makes it work. So there's many kinds of spectator-controlled shuffles that do that. Even, various kinds of applications for certain kinds of, I don't know what you call Klondike shuffle or a milking kind of shuffle. Why do it in that way? Why do you have to shuffle it like that? Why do you shuffle or put down a random number of cards, but then you deal only one at a time here? And then what is the arbitration involved in that? Based on what restrictions and evidence are those rules present to do it in that way? It's entirely ambiguous, right? So all of these principles really rely on the same concept of ambiguity, of arbitration, of equivocation. And it's just a matter of where the equivocation is being applied. Is it being applied to the choice? Is it being applied to the revelation? Or is it being applied to the rules that have been set? Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of these things. For example, I want to go back to the patio force and the rules surrounding the 64 principle, that four queens procedure, and really all these things. But specifically with the patio force, let's say we're doing the patio force, and I've got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll make it odd. We'll just do this. We'll put. And I think the way this works with an odd number, this is the outcome. It's pick 2, eliminate. What would it be? I think they have to eliminate, or they have to pick the first 2 when it's odd. Let's see if that comes out. I always get this confused. It's very important if you're ever going to use this that you refresh your memory on it and you know the rules. Rather than enter into this and say, here's what's going to happen. You're going to pick 2, and I'm going to eliminate 1. And then I'll pick 2, and you eliminate 1. Sound good? Okay, let's go. Instead of doing that, what you should do is say, look, here's 2. Why don't you eliminate 1? Just get into it. Don't even tell them what comes next. Right? Just do it. I think that's the solution to this. I think with this particular kind of force is don't set up a premise of rules. Let them discover the rules of the game. Have you ever played a game where you're playing it for the first time, but other people have played it before and they're teaching you the game? And I usually say the same thing when I'm in this situation. Every time I say, well, let's get started, and as we go along, you help me out, right? And I'll learn it as we go. And the first time things are a little rough and bumpy, you probably lose. You don't get all of the rules in place, but it is an immersive way to learn the game. And then the next time you play the game, it's kind of more for real because now you understand the game a little bit better. I think it's better to do these kinds of forces in that way. So to start it, you say, here, why don't you, I think I might have this backwards here, but whatever. Here, these two, why don't you pick one to get rid of, right? They get rid of that one. And then say, and then you just go on to the next set of rules. But why don't you pick two? They pick those two and say, look, I'll get rid of that one. And you say, oh, here, how about out of these two? Can you, get rid of one? And then you pick two, and they pick these two. And you say, okay, I'll get rid of that one. And then you say, these two, why don't you get rid of one? And they get rid of that one. And then, of course, those two. And you say, okay, I'm going to get rid. So rather than setting up the premise of the rules and giving away the method, even though it's not apparent, and I think it's safe to do it in that way, I just think it's cleaner to just get into it, make the first choice that you can make, have them make the first choice that they can make, then give direction for the next step. Okay. When it comes to the other one, we talked about the 64 principle, the Queen's thing. I think it's better to do it like this. Just say, go ahead and pick one for yourself. Why don't you pick one for me? This one? Okay, very good. Go ahead and pick one for yourself. Good. And one for me? Pick one for me. Good, very good. Can you just point to one more for me? This one? Good, very good. I think it's better to just get into it rather than set up the rules. Don't make the mistake of explaining what the process is going to be. First, you're going to pick one for you, and then you'll pick one for me, and then one for you, and so on. Sound good? Okay, let's do it. Rather than setting up the fact that there are arbitrary rules, just get into it, do the first selection, and then add the arbitrary follow-up to the next step. And then it clowns up. It adds more ambiguity, actually. It uses ambiguity against itself to cover up the fact that there are rules that are driving the procedure that allow it to work. Otherwise, you risk with these kinds of procedures, these kinds of process sorts of forces, you risk kind of exposing at the onset that this is merely just a math trick. It's just an organizational math trick disguised as free selection. So anyway, that's my recommendation. Hide the arbitrary rules surrounding some of these things by merely jumping into it. Avoiding the formality of setting up the process, I think, can be very helpful. Now, I think it also can be helpful to go the other way if there is good justification. If whatever rules you're using can be justified in some way, then spell out the rules. But if there's no justification for having the rules being what they are, don't make them rules. Don't make them a procedural kind of game that you're playing. Just get into the first step and then go on from there. So don't state the rules, just do the first round, and then logically can follow with the next one. To look at this principle, though, I do want to touch on this a little bit about how you can really muddy it up. And this is an application I've seen. If you were to assume that this was a bank night kind of a thing, where you had envelopes and stuff inside envelopes, rather than having 3 envelopes that have 3 items for you and 3 envelopes that have 3 items for them, it could be good to have 1 envelope that could be for them, but you're going to take it. And then in one of the other envelopes that has your thing in it, have 2 of the thing that you're supposed to get. This is a layered method on top of the force. What you will actually do is you'll just use that envelope twice to reveal one item and then use it again to reveal the third item as if it's the third envelope. And this can work very, very nicely. It can look like this. So it starts out by saying, look, pick one envelope. This one? Okay, go ahead. And it could be either one because both of these are applicable, right? And then you say, I'll tell you what, pick one for me. And they pick this one again. It could be anyone. You say, okay, that's perfect. Why don't you do this again? Go ahead and pick one for you. And they pick this one for themselves. And then you go on again to do one for you. And here, what's going to happen is that if they pick this one for you, you're good. And if they pick this one for you, you're still good. But it changes the way the outcome is, or the way it could play out. Let's say they pick this one for you. Now you're in a really interesting situation where you can say, pick one for you, and they pick this one, and then this one goes to you. Or you could say, look, why don't you pick another one for me, and this one is what they pick, and because it doesn't matter, you can say, would you like to switch this one of mine, for one of yours? Now you've added a layer in where they can do that. And this looks really, really off-putting, right? And then you take that, and of course this one is theirs at the end, right? Or at this point you could say, in fact, would you like to switch this last one for this one, for one of mine? Of course they can, right? And you still have it. Now, in the revelation, they show one, you show one, or it's better if you show one. You say, in my envelope I've got this. You drop, this might be the double that's got two of the same thing in it. You drop that down, and then they show one in their envelope, they've got that. And then you say, in my envelope I've got this. And then you show that one, which is by itself. Drop that down. And then on the next revelation they show theirs. And then you're going to just show this one again and pull out the second item in it. And here it looks like you've emptied three, but actually one still has one of their things in it as a duplicate. And that's a nice way to work it out. Now, let's go back to this real quick. Let's say that it doesn't come out so clean. One for them. One for you. One for them. On this one, they pick this one for you. This is still in play. Now, what you could do is when they pick this one for you, because this is the same as them, you could just insert your choice here. Say, oh, would you like to switch one of mine for one of yours? They can or don't have to, but if they do, it doesn't matter. And now you still inserted that additional phase to it, which really muddies up the process and makes it quite confusing, because it makes it feel like they really took a chance and a risk on this in the end, but they haven't. Now you're left in the same state you would be if you were just doing the regular 64 principle force, right? Can you pick one more for me? You just apply your layer of equivoque here at the end to make it come out right. However you want to do that, you can. There's other ways you could probably make this even more complex if you wanted to, but that is just the simple solution for that to get down to the end. And you have a whole other selection in there, a changing of one's mind that really muddies up the procedure in terms of an envelope banknight kind of situation there, where you can show two rather than show all three, because one is double loaded. You would have to have that marked. Of course, you have the ones you need marked so that you can do that. But anyway, just a little bit more on that in terms of using ambiguity to your favor. Ambiguity, I think, is the most important element in the entirety of magic principles. Everything really does operate on that, whether it be equivoque itself, these very clever forces, which I think in their in the engine under the hood really are still operating on equivoque. It just is disguised a little bit. Or multiple outs, which I think again under the hood is still operating under equivoque. Or various types of spectator-driven things that have rules placed into them. And it's the presence of these rules that is the equivocation. Ambiguity. Number one principle. Hopefully you've learned a few things from this that you can kind of analyze your own work and your own material and find different ways to apply it, cleaner ways to apply it, more clever and slick, smooth ways to apply this principle of ambiguity in your material. So good luck with that. Happy magicking.